Hi there, grade 12s. Welcome back to Dandelion Delphi tutorials. This is only for you as we are dealing with two-dimensional arrays today in the Supplementary 2019 question 4. So before we tackle this question, we need to see what values were given. And there was an array called array types it's a one-dimensional array from 1 to 4 containing these values. And it's the different types of trees. Then we had another one-dimensional array with 24 trees listed in here. So this is array list and it contains the names of 24 trees, but then it also has a hash and then the type of tree indicated after the hash. Another way this question could have been asked is to place these values in a text file. So the C will indicate that it's a citrus tree, and the T for tropical, and the N for nuts, and the D for deciduous. You also then had a two-dimensional array declared for you. Currently the array is empty, and it has 4 rows and 6 columns, and the 4 rows correspond with your types of trees because your array types had 4 values in that one-dimensional array, and we can have a maximum of 6 trees per type. Make sure that you use these variables declared for you that was assigned at the top. So in this first button, what they're asking you to do is to take the array list and then place the trees in the correct row. So row 1 is going to contain all my citrus trees that have a hash C, and then the deciduous trees are in row 2, nuts in 3, and then tropical in 4, and depending on what goes after the hash, that is in which row you need to place that tree. Before you try this, I just want to show you there was an error in the data files. So this is actually what was given. I've just copied out part of it, and the mistake that was made was instead of a T for tropical, they've placed an S there. So you have two options. You can either change all the S's for T's as I have done, or you can just search for an S instead of a T. So here is the rest of the question. You can run your program, but currently it will not display because you have not written the code to display. So it might be a good idea for you to do question 4.2 as well and just display array types with these labels as well, which is from your one-dimensional array. Press pause. I'll show you the memo for both buttons just now. So what I'm doing here is I'm looping from 1 to itypes. Itypes was our global variable and it had a value of 4, which corresponds with my rows in my two-dimensional array. It then also corresponds with my array types because the first one is for the citrus trees. Array types will then hold the value of citrus, and then I will be able to store it in the correct position, and I'll also be able to display it later using array types. Now, since I don't want to add all the trees in the column for each row, I will need to create a new variable icol that I initialize to 0, and when I add a tree to this row, I then ink that I column, and then I place the tree in the current row in the next column. So this inner loop of mine is just looping through my one-dimensional array list that contains the values of the trees that would look like that. In iLast, I have stored the length of the item in array list that I'm currently working with. You could place this code in here as well, but I just thought it would be easier to break it down into 2 steps. I want to get hold of that last character, so that would be iLast, the length of that value or item stored in array lists. So array list is the list with 24 items, so we're going to refer to that item with using iRow, and then iLast is the last character of that item in the array. So if this was the value, we would be referring to the C, and we're testing it against array type. So while K is 1, I'm going to place all the citrus trees in array trees 1. So you'll see the K's there correspond. So I am testing if the last character in array list is equal to the first character of array type. So citrus would be stored in there with a C. And then I'm incrementing my column counter here, and I am placing, if it is the first citrus tree I'm adding, this would be 1, and I'm placing the first citrus tree into array trees 1, column 1. The second citrus tree is then added until I have all the citrus trees in array trees, row 1. Then only do I loop and I go to the second row of array trees. So the second row is for the deciduous trees, and I'm starting its columns also with 0. And now I'm looping again through my array with a list of trees, testing now if the last character is D, because array types 2 would be deciduous, and I'm testing if the last character of the item in array list is a D. If it is, I increment the column counter and I add that tree to array trees I call. Lastly, you have to make sure that you enable the next 2 buttons. Since the question asked me here to use modular design, I decided to create a display procedure for array trees. And here is my display. I'm displaying in a rich edit. I first need to clear it, and I'm looping with my rows from 1 to itypes, itypes being your global variable. itypes had a value of 4, and that corresponds with the number of rows that I have in my 2-dimensional array. I need to add the type first, so I start my display string variable with the type that it is currently at. So for number 1, it will add citrus now to sDisplay, a colon, and then a tab space. And then I loop with my inner loop I call all the way from 1 to 6. Inum was 6 because I had 6 columns in my 2-dimensional array. And I add each tree's name to my sDisplay. Before I loop again to go to the next row, I then display sDisplay in my rich edit, and then only do I go to my second row, then adding deciduous to sDisplay and building the rest of the rows like that. So all I have here in my button 4.2 is calling my display procedure. So in this last question, we are asked to do some sorting. Press pause and try it yourself. So first you have to delete the last 2 characters. You will see in the output that you don't see the hash and the character after the hash. So that is the first part, and then you need to have a look at your array trees, and within each row, this is my 2-dimensional array, within a row the names of the trees must be in alphabetical order. So you're keeping the rows the same, but you are changing the columns. So what I'm doing here is I'm looping from 1 to 4. itypes was given a value as a global variable, and the value there was 4. And this represents the rows, number of rows in my array trees. Within that now, I first need to get rid of the hash inside of the array tree. So here I'm looping in my column with my column counter from 1 to inum, and inum was 6. That was the number of columns of array trees. And I'm finding the position of the hash, and then I am deleting from the hash for 2 characters. So after this line, I will be left with orange instead of orange hash C. Still inside of this loop, so let's pretend we're still in the first time that it's executing. So I row will be 1. Everywhere in here you will see I row stays the same. I am looping now through my columns. So my columns have the value stored in inum, and remember it's inum minus 1. And then on my inner loop loops from I out plus 1 all the way to inum. Then I test in here if the 1 value, we're still keeping the row the same, but I'm comparing the columns with each other, I out and I in. And if the one is greater than the other, then I start my swapping process similar to what we do in 1-dimensional arrays. You start and end with your keeper, and keeping the rows the same because I don't want to change citrus to nuts. I want to keep the row, but I'm swapping the column. So if I out is on the right, in the next line I out needs to be on the left. Then I will follow with I in on the right and I in on the left. And then it goes to the second row, deletes the hashes and the character and swaps that row and all the way through to the end, which is row 4. And here at the bottom I just called my display procedure, which will work now because I have deleted the hashes from my array trees, and I've also sorted array trees, and display is displaying that two-dimensional array. Thank you grade 12s for watching Dandelion Delphi tutorials. Please leave some comments when you have questions and I'll answer them as soon as I can. If you want more activities and explanations on two-dimensional arrays, have a look at my Dandelion Delphi Book 3. Hope to see you soon!